It's my pleasure to introduce two of our colleagues here. The first, we'll let age before beauty go. No, we'll let beauty before age go. Or no, we'll let Luke go. So it's the same thing. So our first speaker will be Luke Trinity, and they'll tag team this. Luke has been with our lab since its inception, both first as an undergraduate and then as a master's student in the Complex Systems and Data Science program at UVM. He's been working with us throughout this time. He's one of our lead software engineers. He's contributed to the design, so he's not just a worker bee. He's a co-creator with us. He's a local of the area, so he's coming home, homecoming for him, and we're excited to have Luke Trinity join us. So Luke, and the co-presenter here is Scott Merrill, and Scott is a research assistant professor at UVM in the Plant and Soil Science department. He is a systems ecologist. He actually has an undergraduate degree in psychology and mathematics as well as a degree in ecology. He's our managing director of the SEGS lab. He keeps it together. He is the glue, and he works very hard on experimental gaming and advancing those as novel techniques. And you'll hear more about their work right now. So it's a pleasure, Luke and Scott.
Thanks for having me here. I'm really excited to actually be able to show off some of our research. And with Luke we're starting off today with what we consider our compliance game. There's been a lot of people that have been involved in this project, so Luke and I have a chance to stand up here, but a lot of the names you'll see up here are part of this team, and they've really helped bring this all together. And we've had a lot of support. I want to throw this acknowledgement slide up, and thank you, Julie, for putting this all together. So to bring it back to what we're really talking about here, we know that in general, there's a couple components that go into disease spread. We have a lot of these epidemiological factors. And that's a really great start. That's a really great base. But what we don't have is a second component that may be just as important or more important. And that's what we all came together to try to figure out, this human behavioral side of spread of disease in these systems. And we have two major questions that we're going to be looking at in this serious game framework today. One is a willingness to invest or adopt more biosecurity on farm at an upper level. And the second one is those willingness to actually obey the rules, if you will, comply with the biosecurity protocols that are in place in a system. So we have these two aspects. One is a willingness to actually increase your biosecurity, but also those willingness to actually follow the rules. As Chris mentioned, we're looking at this at multiple different levels, from the strategic to the tactical and to the operational. And right now, we're going to concentrate on what's considered our compliance game, which is at the operational level. We were recently at a workshop put together by Steve Dreetz and others. Thank you for that. And it was a great opportunity to actually interact with people that were running a farm system up in Minnesota. And one of the people that we actually interacted with, he actually came up and was like, well, as far as taking these showers, going in and out, making sure they're clean, I'd just be really happy if I could get my guys to use soap. And this really struck me as like, this issue of compliance and obeying the rules is pervasive. These people get lax. They've been doing it for so long. They just want to get through their day. And that statement to me was like, wow, it's not just like trying to make sure that they're taking a shower. It's like these things happen every day. Getting them to use soap, getting them to follow the actual protocols is a real issue. So we've been tossing around the word compliance a lot. And I wanted to make sure that it was clear that what we're talking about is at the operational level. There's a lot of compliance that we're dealing with, that people talk about compliance. with stop order movements and things like that. We're not talking about that upper level compliance with mandates by government or anything like that. We're talking about the operational level when we're talking here. And just to give you a little flavor of what we're talking about here. In a situation where we actually put people into one of these games, we were able to, without changing the risk of infection, same situation, they're doing the exact same thing, we changed the information a little and changed the message a little, and we actually changed their willingness to comply and obey the rules from around over 80% down to 30%. And we think about all these epidemiological factors that are out there, and I don't know any that are bigger than that. If you think about breaks in compliance and breaks in biosecurity, when we have something like that where in the same risk level, same situation, we'll have almost everybody obeying the rules to a very small fraction. And we'll show you in a little while how we actually got to those numbers. But that was pretty striking with the behavioral component only, how much difference we can actually make. We're also seeing a lot of differences within individuals. So we can actually like cluster individuals and say, okay, these people are doing something, these people are doing something else. What's going on there? And can we actually start thinking about how to target those audiences to actually get our messages across better? So we actually are seeing ways of actually communicating to different groups and isolating and identifying these different groups. So Chris briefly mentioned these serious games. And what we use is these digital formats. It's something people come in and they use a computer or they use a VR headset. They use something, so it's a digital framework. We have very simple things that we're testing where they have a choice, basically, and we're testing that choice. So we have to make these games fairly simplistic to actually be effective for data gathering. And when we talk about these treatments, we're just changing a couple of things at a time so we can really dial in the differences in that system. One important factor is, and this is to answer a question that you had yesterday, how do we get these people to actually behave well? And we actually pay them based on how well we do it, how well they actually play the game. So with these performance-based incentives, we actually, evidence suggests that we get more engagement and people are more willing to immerse themselves in that situation compared to some of our more traditional forms of gathering data, such as a survey. So paying them actually seems to be a really great way to get them really involved, whether it be an audience in the Pork Expo or students. We have a lot of different experimental styles. Chris mentioned some of these. We have games at the strategic level and the tactical level and the operational level is what I'm going to talk about a little more right now, but later we'll talk about some of these tactical levels. We have virtual reality that we're developing right now where we actually can bring people in and have them in a virtual barn making decisions. And we're also testing some social effects on if we have multiple individuals, or in this case, we have some robots that are going around and moving, what happens to people's behavior when we actually influence them in that way. I already mentioned this, with our performance-based incentives, we have increased salience and increased engagement. We have a number of different audiences that we actually use in our digital field experiments. The easiest one is our university community. Those are a lot of students, but we do advertise to the public. So I've had people coming in from all across a range of activities, from farmers up in above us in the northern kingdom to people that were working in local kitchens. So it's been really nice to actually engage with the public as well as the students. We use an online source of participants called Amazon Mechanical Turks. This audience is relatively cheap, but the data suggests, the research suggests that the data we get from them is very high quality, and they seem to be a more diverse crowd than the university community. And last, we can target our games to specific audiences by actually sending them links or going out to these different places, like Eric Clark took a bunch of did a bunch of games at the World Pork Expo, and unfortunately that was not run this year, the World Pork Expo, because African swine fever. But he did that last year, and you can see that down here where we actually brought in people and had them play games in a booth. So compliance at the operational level, the way we're actually testing this is we're actually putting people in a simulation where they're in a barn and they have a bunch of internal tasks, and they have to make a decision whether or not to go out the shower exit and hopefully use soap, but there isn't actually soap there. They can either go out the shower exit, or, which takes time, and time is money in this game, or they can go quickly out the fire exit. And they make more money when they're going out the fire exit, unless their animals get sick. So they are taking a risk that their animals are going to get sick if they go out that emergency exit. And we provide a little information there about what their risks are, and that information can come in a lot of different forms. What the risk is for going out that door. So the basic idea here is very simple. We put them in a situation. What do you do in that situation? Do you actually comply with the rules or not comply? When you know that there's a chance with non-compliance that you're going to have sick animals. But you could make a lot more money, and we're actually paying them based on how much money they make. So it's a real actual economic trade-off. There's a number of different messages you'll hear today, how we deliver those messages. We could use a simple numeric. This is how much risk there is. There's 5% risk that when you go out that door, you're going to get animals sick. Or we could actually say, oh, there's a word out there, a low chance, or medium chance. The other thing we use is something called a threat gauge, one of these visual cues. And those visual cues have been fairly effective in a lot of different situations. You'll see those in the airports and with our homeland security and threat risks, and you also see them a lot with the fire risk in national forests. We also at times will provide some uncertainty in those answers or those risk things. So we think it's low, but it might be high, it might be medium. Or we think it's 5%, but it could range from 0% to 15%. Or we think it's low, but that arrow might move back and forth, so we don't actually know exactly what it is. So there's an uncertainty component that we can bring into these messages. That's doing a cool little dance there, isn't that? In the game, it doesn't dance quite that much. But yeah, so that's one of the ways that we can actually provide that information. What we found is that without the dancing, the threat gauge with uncertainty was a very effective way of getting people to follow the rules. These visual cues are very good at getting people to understand the actual potential risks that they're taking. Is this... So I think Luke here is going to cue up a video of what this actually looks like. So we have in this situation, we have a worker robot in the corner, and they have a chance to go out either the shower door or the emergency exit. So this is additional information that the worker, the participant, will actually get. you can see them actually doing internal tasks there. That's actually making them money by going around and doing that. But they also have this person up there that may be breaking the rules or may not be breaking the rules. And at this point in time, they have to make a decision. There's a burst pipe, so they have to go outside and change something. And that's the decision they have to make, and they do that round after round. And occasionally, if they go out the emergency exit or the fire exit, their animals will get sick. So I'm going to pass this over to Luke to get into some of the details on some of our results here.
Okay, thanks a lot, Scott. So now I'm going to be getting a little deeper into the results from the compliance simulation. So here along the y-axis, you can see up here at a value of 1, this would indicate total compliance, and then down here, that would be breaking the rules and using the fire exit at every opportunity. And so what we can see here is that as we increase the infection risk in the simulation, we're seeing risk aversion. So as the risk goes up, 1%, almost everyone's breaking the rules, 5%, and then to 15 and 25% risk, almost everyone is following the rules. So this is pretty much what we'd expect. As the infection risk increases, people follow the rules more to avoid that risk. Okay, so how does it look when we see how participants in the simulation responded to different types of messaging? So here we can see that when we presented the risk information graphically, this was giving us our highest level of compliance, and numeric was the worst. So what does that tell us? When you convey risk information numerically, people tend to break the rules more. They don't absorb that information well. Now, how can we look at the effect of uncertainty in risk information? Well, actually, when we communicated the risk information with uncertainty, we saw increased compliance. And this is pretty interesting because as a manager, you might think, you're not sure of the risk, but when you're communicating that to your workers, you might think you need to send a clear message. But what this data tells us is that actually it's okay to communicate uncertainty and risk to your workers, and that they will respond by following the rules more. Okay, so now we're going to look a little bit at the interaction of messaging and uncertainty. And I'm just going to highlight one of the key findings here. It was that bar graph that Scott showed you earlier. So at the exact same level of risk, 5%, when we communicated the information with uncertainty graphically, we're seeing almost everyone following the rules. But with the same risk level, 5%, when the information was communicated with certainty numerically, almost everyone's breaking the rules. So this is a complete flip in behavior, not at all based on risk change, but based on how the information about risk was conveyed. So then we wanted to answer some social questions. So we want to know if a person in the barn sees a coworker breaking or following the rules, how does that influence their behavior? And so we introduced a new coworker into the simulation. So this simulated coworker, before the participant made their decision, the coworker would demonstrate compliance or non-compliance or a control. So you can start to see the questions we're trying to answer. If a coworker sees someone breaking the rules, are they going to pick up the slack and follow the rules, or say, I should break the rules as well? So we saw a change in the risk spectrum, and so the reason I'm highlighting this is because we know that at any given facility, if there's not infection in your area, that the actual perceived risk might be 1% or it might even be much lower. So if we can increase compliance at this level, that would be extremely significant. And then breaking that down here, at the 15% level, we can see that we've seen a big increase in compliance at the 15% risk level in experiment 2. Why was this? Well, we actually omitted the 25% risk treatment. So this kind of indicates that the highest level of risk people see will impact the spectrum of which they play. And then again here, with our most effective messaging treatment, the uncertainty graphical treatment, we're seeing a big increase at the 1% risk level. And again, this is extremely significant because we know that the actual perceived risk at a facility might be 1% or much lower. So now I'm going to talk a little bit about individual differences. So when we want to see how individuals responded to this social nudge at the coworker, we actually saw two different groups starting to emerge. Some individuals followed the simulated coworker in the barn. So if that simulated coworker used the shower facility, they were likely to do so as well. However, with the same exact social nudge, other individuals, which we have deemed anti-followers, actually use the fire exit more. So this tells us that people are responding in opposite ways to the exact same information. So we're going to be looking to kind of expand on these results in the future and use different types of behavioral metrics to quantify these types of different groups and potentially target audiences. So future work, we're going to be developing a compliance game in virtual reality, and you can already start to imagine how are these results going to hold up in a much more immersive environment. So, as a bit of reflection.
Yeah, overall, we've learned a lot through these compliance-style games. And one of the big take-home messages, I guess, for us when we saw this is people really don't have a good grasp of what a number really means. You throw a number out there, and we all have an intuitive sense of what a 5% risk is, but they don't actually use that information well. And so numbers are not an effective way of communicating, it seems like. Those visual cues seem to be very effective. So having some combination when you're actually communicating of these visual cues and whatever information it is will be a productive way of getting that information across. I wanted to tease a little more about what's going to happen this afternoon as well with the communication. What evidence suggests that you're going to need is a lot of Tim and Deanna's work. You need a number of components to actually have an effective message. You need internalization, what it actually means to you. You need a component of what the problem is, this explanation of the problem. And you need action steps. So what are you supposed to do with that information to actually get something across? So what we're talking about here a lot is how to deliver that information and potentially get at some of that internalization and explanation and action. So what are the delivery methods that you can actually use to start building that communication message so that you can actually make a real impact at your facility or whichever kind of message you're actually trying to do. So you need all those components. And what we're doing here is we're trying to give you some tools and show you some tools on how that actually is done. As Luke mentioned, this uncertainty component is really fascinating on how that actually works. It could be a tool that we can use to increase or change behavior using uncertainty itself. But we have to be cognizant that some people use the same information and they take the same message and they're reacting in the exact different way. They're opposite ways with the exact same information. So the individuals are not always the same. And we're going to touch on that a little later here with some of the work that Eric and Olene and I will be presenting as well. But the individuals are different. We're messy, as Chris mentioned earlier. Humans aren't always sane. And they all react differently to the same information. So, yeah. Okay, so it sounds like we have a few minutes left for some questions and to either Luke or myself or Chris. Yeah.
There you go. So why don't you guys use the podium? Actually, I saw this hand, and then we'll go here. Yeah.
So part of your findings, does that mean that you need to show the result? You need to share information in multiple different ways to ensure compliance?
I would suggest that there's a lot of evidence that a consistent message, a convergent message, as Tim might say, will be very effective, more effective than any sort of thing where you only have one time, or you have a divergent message where you're saying something one way, but actually providing this opportunity for something else. The anecdote that we brought up a lot of times was with this line of separation, that people were told that they were never supposed to go out the emergency exit, and then ashtrays were put out so that people could go out for a quick break, a smoke break outside. So there's this convergent and divergent messages. In that sense, that was a very divergent message. They're saying, no, 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 but we understand if you want to go outside for a quick break. Over and over again, getting the same message will be helpful.
Hi, my name is Corey Meyer from Griffin Scientific, and I'm wondering whether you were able to do any analyses after stratifying your respondents. So, for example, by prior training or education, I'd be interested to see if that influences the way that people behave.
We have collected those data, and we are in the process of analyzing. There's some really interesting things out there, but we have a lot of data on these demographic style data, and we're really excited about getting into that. So we haven't actually done all those things, but we have the pieces together to, once we actually get these different groups out there, it's like, is there a signal in there as well? So
We have differentiated, and Eric's going to talk about this, between the farmer or the producer respondents and the other groups. So stay tuned. You'll see some stratification just by different samples.
Thanks.
We have one more question.
Where? Oh, okay.
Thank you, Ann Lichtenwalder at Maine. And I just wondered, because it's like you're using payment of the gamers as a proxy for ownership in the business, so to speak. Is there some other way of capturing that sense of involvement in the outcome? I just wonder if that's another layer you'll build in. Thank you.
yeah, thanks for the question. It's a really tough question. Trying to find a proxy that actually is effective for getting behavior that's realistic. I don't know. I think I'm answering your question correct. So there are a lot of different proxies that we could use. Things like you're getting a greater cooperation and these social benefits from it that are really hard in this environment to really capture well. But we've had a lot of those discussions, and it comes back to I would say that there's a lot of value to these other ways of thinking about it, but the evidence in the scientific world that we've seen suggests that we can really use these as a proxy that is well documented. So I think it comes down to that. What do we have that we know really works well? Even though these other things are working well, we don't know how your value of this social effect, it differs from this other person on this social benefit. If we give you a badge for doing something well, you may be different than someone else. So it's a tough one, but it's a really important question.
And if you have ideas and thoughts for us, that's the kind of feedback we're looking for.
What's that?
I guess one last question. Question.
Just say your name and all that goes through. Oh, okay. Chris Heine, Oklahoma State University. So I guess my question is the anti-group on that lower end that would do the opposite behavior. So do you do some sort of behavioral profiling or assessment of those individuals? Is that like the thrill-seeking, adrenaline junkies, anti-establishment people? And would that lead to profiling who might be employed within a facility?
So profiling is not a word that we've really decided to hold on to, but in a sense we have those discussions, and we're taking a lot of data on, especially in these post-game surveys that we do. We can look at what is your risk spectrum, what is your personality type even, and we have a lot of these kind of questions. And it may come to the point where we're actually starting to say, well, this type of employee, if you ask this series of questions, looks like they might actually be a more compliant employee. I don't like the word compliant in that sense either, but profiling and compliant, I mean, I feel like I'm just trying to create these drone workers here somehow. But I think the answer to your question is we are trying to find ways of figuring out who might be a good worker, but also how those people might need a different message. And if we're trying to actually influence them in a positive way, what messages and what way of communicating might be different in that group than a different group.
Okay, I think we've got to move on.
Yep.
Thank you both.